A very warm welcome. You're watching World 360. I'm Akanksha Swarup. Now, the war in Ukraine remains our top focus, and so does the troubles facing UK's Prime Minister Liz Truss. This as China's President Xi Jinping prepares to seal an unprecedented third term. We'll bring you all of that. But first up are the headlines. Despite Russia's barrage of missiles, Ukraine keeps up pressure, advances further into the port city of Kherson. NATO defense ministers back Ukraine air defense needs. Putin cautions of a global catastrophe if NATO clashes with the Russian army. Britain's PM Liz Truss fires her finance minister Kwasi Kwarteng amid reports of a government collapse. UK's Indian origin Home Secretary Suella Braverman's anti-India immigration comments stir the hornet's nest. The much-touted India-UK free trade agreement bears the brunt. US President Joe Biden describes Pakistan as one of the most dangerous nations that holds nuclear weapons without any cohesion. This while addressing the Democratic Congressional Campaign reception in Los Angeles. And Chinese President Xi Jinping eyes an unprecedented third term at China's 20th Communist Party Congress. Let's deep dive with our top focus, that is the Russia-Ukraine war. Earlier this week, Russian forces launched hundreds of missile strikes in Ukraine. Many of these hit the capital, Kiev. But Ukraine continues to ramp up pressure as they are advancing further into Kherson, with Russia ordering evacuation in areas occupied by the Kremlin. Meanwhile, one of the regions that Russia has claimed to annex, and that is, of course, Kherson, is seeing a strong push by Ukrainian forces, so much so that Russia is allowing residents to flee to Russia. Moreover, Russia now has a new war general in charge of its war in Ukraine. His name is Sergei Surovikin and has a reputation for brutality. He previously played an instrumental role in Russia's operations in Syria. And that's not all. NATO's defense ministers meet that took place earlier this week decided that they would soon provide Ukraine with hundreds of drone jammers, only in a bid to step up the country's air defense. And following NATO's recent support to Ukraine, Russia's President Vladimir Putin has now extended a warning threatening of a nuclear catastrophe, that is, if NATO clashes with Ukraine's army. Now, Putin was addressing a news conference in Kazakhstan's Astana when he passed this word of caution. A top US official has told CNN in Russia that the country is burning through its stockpile of high-tech weapons and is desperately trying to buy parts for new ones. At the same time, Elon Musk's SpaceX is asking the Pentagon to start paying tens of millions of dollars per month only to keep Ukrainian forces supplied with its Starlink service. CNN's Nick Payton-Walsh shows us why this is essential.
Night is when the push for the south busies. Humvees speed the roads. Incendiary munitions light up the night. That dusk, the skies alight with air defences around the Russian-held, heavily defended town of Snihirivka, just 3 miles south of here. It's the gateway to the big prize, the city of Kherson, where Russia is already evacuating civilians and low on supplies. They say that the shelling has been noticeably less over the past month and a half, probably because of the damage done to supply lines the Russians need to bring munitions towards the front here. Radio chatter they've intercepted between Russians here is of ammo running out and conscripts fleeing.
Тих, що зараз прислали мобілізованих, вони називають гуманітаркою. Кажуть, нам не треба цієї гуманітарки.
In 3 days, moving around the front lines here, it's clear Ukraine's movement forwards has met a hardened Russian defence, even if they are low on ammo. On this tree line to Snihirivka's west, the Russian paratroopers are under a mile away.
Вони добре підготовлені, час тут кидають. От вчора обстрілювали чуть далі там ту посадку, буквально метрів 200, кинули більше 15 кабачків.
New trenches are being dug and camouflage laid out. Nature is about to turn on both sides equally. So obviously in the winter, the cover of the trees will be gone, and so there's a race here to prepare new positions so they can't be seen by Russian drones in the winter. A mix of the oldest type of warfare and oven-heating bunk beds underground here. Place for their rifles. This for 5 people. This is where they're going to be during the winter if they're still here. And the newest. This is an antenna for Starlink. Billionaire Elon Musk's satellite internet service sending a live stream of drone footage of the artillery battle here.
Працює артилерія по наших позиціях. Тобто я пробую її знайти.
This is where that signal is sent.
Зараз мої пости побачили якісь незрозумілі.
Meet Fugas, his nickname, a farmer turned drone warfare commander. And then the lethal impact of a billionaire's internet service and store-bought drones. A hit on a Russian vehicle. The black smoke under the mouse cursor. They show us video of several impacts that day. They know they will be hit back.
Не цінують життя людини, і їм байдуже життя їхнього солдата, на відміну від нас. Але в той самий час вони також постійно проводять там різного типу розвідку.
In the villages out east in Kherson, we see how fierce the fight for each village has been. Ukraine is slowly moving forwards, but every farm is a slog, smoke crawling over every hill. One of Russia's largest bombs hit here. Nothing left to come back for if you once lived in these homes. It is as if this wasteland is telling the Kremlin it's time to leave, but they think there's more damage left to do before the inevitable happens. Nick Payton-Walsh, CNN, Nizhny Rivka, Ukraine.
And with that, let's now shift our attention over to the United States, Pakistan, and of course, India. The US President Joe Biden has called Pakistan one of the most dangerous nations in the world. This at a Democratic Congressional Party event in Los Angeles. Biden described Pakistan as one of the most dangerous nations that, and I quote, holds nuclear weapons without any cohesion. The statement that has arrived as a setback to Pakistan, who has now issued a démarche to the US ambassador, is, of course, a part of a series of setbacks that have now been playing out between Pakistan and the United States. While at the United Nations General Assembly, India has once again lashed out at Pakistan for making pointless remarks about Kashmir on a global platform. Ruchira Kamboj, India's permanent representative to the UN, said that the entirety of Jammu and Kashmir is and will always be an integral part of India. She also called on Pakistan to stop cross-border terrorism. The remarks were made at an emergency special session of the UNGA on the Ukraine war. Pakistan's diplomat Munir Akram had brought up the issue of Kashmir in a bid to draw parallels with the war in Ukraine.
It is important, however, to set the record straight. The entire territory of Jammu and Kashmir is and will always be an integral and inalienable part of India, irrespective of what the representative of Pakistan believes or covets. We call on Pakistan to stop cross-border terrorism so that our citizens can enjoy their right to life and liberty.
Now, CNN's Jake Tapper spoke exclusively with United States President Joe Biden about a range of topics. They spoke about ties with Saudi Arabia, Biden's Armageddon remark, meeting Putin in Bali, and more. Let's listen in to what the US President has to say.
Do you think it's time for the U.S. to rethink its relationship with Saudi Arabia?
Yes, and by the way, let's get straight why I went. I didn't go to one about oil. I went about making sure that we made sure that we weren't going to walk away from the Middle East. We should, and I am, in the process when this House and Senate gets back, they're going to have to. There's going to be some consequences for what they've done with Russia.
What kind of consequences? Menendez says suspend all arms sales. Is that something you'd consider?
I'm not going to get into what I'd consider and what I have in mind, but there will be consequences.
When people hear the word Armageddon, they get scared. Used by a U.S. president, they get scared. Do you think in any way discussing this type of thing publicly, openly, Putin's possible use of nuclear weapons, might have the opposite effect of what you want? It might make some of our wobblier European allies be even more scared of confronting Putin.
Well, no, I don't think so at all. I think, look, it was a directed, when I'm talking to Putin. He, in fact, cannot continue with impunity to talk about the use of a tactical nuclear weapon as if that's a rational thing to do. The mistakes get made, and the miscalculation could occur. No one can be sure what would happen, and it could end in Armageddon.
And you still are afraid of that, though, that it could?
Well, no, I don't think any rational person saying the initial use of of a nuclear weapon, killing thousands of people, does not have the prospect of leading to something that can be way out of control.
Would you be willing to meet with him at the G20?
Look, I have no intention of meeting with him, but for example, if he came to me at the G20 and said, I want to talk about the release of Griner, I'd meet with him. I mean, it would depend.
Big question, of course, is when you're going to make an official announcement about whether or not you're going to run for 2024 for re-election. Do you think you'll make a decision before the end of the year?
Well, look, I'm not going to make this about my decision. I'm going to make this about this off-year election. After that's done in November, then I'm going to be in the process of deciding.
Is one of the calculations that you think you're the only one who can beat Donald Trump?
I believe I can beat Donald Trump again.
All right, let's also now talk about a government which is standing on shaky grounds. The British Prime Minister Liz Truss is fighting for her political survival after firing her Chancellor and announcing a second U-turn on a major economic policy. UK's newly appointed Finance Minister Jeremy Hunt has in fact admitted to mistakes made by Liz Truss and warned that some taxes could go up. Meanwhile, the free trade agreement between India and the UK might not get wrapped up before the deadline this month. And these reports have emerged just days after the British Home Secretary of Indian origin, Suella Braverman, linked the trade deal to increased migration of Indians to the UK. Braverman stated that Indian migrants overstay their visa. Not surprising, the comments have not gone down well with New Delhi. And to get us more information and a sense of perspective, I'm joined in by my colleague Sanjay Suri, who's joining us live from Leicester. Sanjay, Britain's Prime Minister Liz Truss fired her Finance Minister Kwasi Kwarteng amid reports of a government collapse. In fact, Jeremy Hunt, as we all know, has taken over from Kwarteng. Do these developments now indicate that Truss's economic experiment has failed?
You know, the question that Truss emphatically did not answer in that press conference after sacking Kwarteng is why she did not leave herself. Kwarteng was, after all, only implementing policies that were hers, in agreement with hers, and policies she had been going on and on about through the course of that campaign for the post of PM, that she would bring in tax cuts without explaining where the money would come from. These policies were strongly opposed by Rishi Sunak. He warned that these would be a disaster, and of course now we know who was right. And now, further, Truss has said that she will, as Sunak had said he would, raise corporation tax to 25%. And she had ridiculed him for this and opposed him again all the way through the campaign in hustings after hustings. The question now is that we are now facing a rather odd situation where the winner in that race is implementing the policies of the loser. Trussonomics, as it was called, is now gone. Sadly, the need for this to go was not clear to enough Tories and in time.
Right. Well, that is the bitter irony of this political conundrum, Sanjay, that's facing the UK's economy at the moment. But having said that, the India-UK Free Trade Agreement was touted as a landmark agreement between the UK and India, which is now hanging by a slim thread. Have the Home Secretary Suella Braverman's recent anti-India immigration remarks impacted this deal?
That thread is not now quite as slim as Suella Braverman would have it be. She's been silenced on that one, and now she clarifies that she is supportive of the FTA after all. She had no choice really but to backtrack on her earlier remarks. A government spokesperson says that talks are on track. an FTA would be such a big prize for Truss's government to announce, and she can do with some achievements to boast and to announce. She's, after all, the one also who started off these negotiations as Trade Secretary earlier. Braverman appears to have spoken against the FTA in some form of prejudice against Indians, though she is of Indian origin herself. She has blamed the recent migrants from India for the riots here in Leicester, evidently unfairly, and paralleled that with elements on migration in the FTA, suggesting that who knows, FTA would bring in hordes of violent Hindus to bust up the peace in England's lovely little towns. Now, the remarks that she made and the damage from those has not quite been undone. It certainly has been limited, and perhaps the only real explanation for this is that she didn't quite know what she was talking about.
Absolutely. In fact, we'll have to wait and watch if that leaves any hope for the future of the FTA agreement between UK and India. Many thanks to you, Sanjay Suri, for bringing in all those details. And with that, let's now look east. Beijing is on high alert after rare protests denouncing Xi Jinping took over the capital and Chinese social media as well. These rare protests involved banners denouncing Chinese President Xi Jinping and the country's stringent COVID-19 policies. Now, the banners that you can see in these images called for Xi's exit. They were hung from an overpass bridge, and the images were widely circulated on social media. In fact, the incident comes at a very sensitive time for China and the Chinese Communist Party as well, which is bracing for the twice-in-a-decade gathering on the 16th of October. Interestingly, Xi Jinping is all set to secure an unprecedented third term as the party president, raising concerns about becoming China's president for life. And when we say that, let's also try and get in a sense of perspective and what the CCP has in store for China. For that, I'm joined in by CNN's Christy Lou-Stout, who's joining me live from Hong Kong right now. Christy, thank you so much for joining in on my newscast today. Now, there's already talk of the lack of young blood within the Politburo Standing Committee. Will the 20th Congress have any picks who can be hoped to take the mantle on from Xi, or is Xi Jinping now president for life?
You know, Akanksha, with the party Congress underway, all eyes are on the Chinese president, Xi Jinping. You know, Xi Jinping, he's not just the president of China, he is also the head of the military. He's also the party secretary, right, the general secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. And at this event, it's expected that he will take that unprecedented third term as leader of the Communist Party, further consolidating his power and cementing his status as the most powerful leader in China for decades. And, you know, but because of that step away from president, it's going to be much more difficult for China watchers to figure out who is the successor, who is going to be next in line. So China watchers need to look out very carefully at the Politburo Standing Committee. This is the top decision-making body in China to look at who is going to be part of this new standing committee, how many people will be part of this new standing committee, because it's not a fixed number, and also who, when the CCTV, state-run TV cameras start rolling and broadcasting the images to China and around the world, who will be standing most closely to Xi Jinping. Also looking for signs not just for a possible successor, but who could be the next premier of China. Back to you.
Right. Christy, it's interesting that you mentioned who will be making for the members of the Standing Committee. What explains the lack of female representation in the Politburo Standing Committee?
You know, that is such an astute question. Look, the Politburo Standing Committee is not representative of China. In fact, the 20th Party Congress is not representative of the population of China. Attending this conference, as we've seen in previous Congresses, is you see members of the Communist Party who are business executives, who are provincial officials, who are even farmers or laborers, but in the past only just over a quarter are women. Not representative of the population of China, but representative of the higher end of power of the political elite, especially the Communist Party in China. Back to you.
In fact, Christy, it's shocking considering the kind of social advancement and economic advancement that China has made. Having said that, a protest in Beijing was swiftly ended on Thursday. Could you tell us about the kind of opposition being faced by Xi Jinping, that too before he secures a third term?
Yeah, and Akanksha, that was an incredible, rare and brazen protest that took place that was directing its ire not just against China's zero COVID policy, but also the core leader himself, the Chinese president, Xi Jinping. Look, in the run-up to this party Congress, there has been rising anger and frustration in China that's been manifested online and on social media and also in the real world. Anger about frozen bank deposits. Anger about China's punishing zero COVID strategy, which has disrupted both lives and livelihoods. And the Chinese government has been responding with security clampdowns, with censorship by scrubbing all forms of dissent off the internet and off social media as well, and by saying stability is paramount and any criticism out there about human rights is an example of Western propaganda or foreign interference.
Right.
But Akanksha, analysts do point out that there will be more such scenes of protest, whether it's virtual or real world ahead, especially as China's economy continues to slow and especially if China continues to hold on to this tough zero COVID policy. Akanksha.
All right, we'll have to see how the CCP goes ahead with that National Congress. Many thanks to you, Christy Liu Stout, for bringing in all those details. And with that, it's time to slip into a quick break as we'll be back with more global updates. Stay tuned to World 360.